We are going to get this hearing underway. Sorry that we are a few minutes late. Representative Rigby, if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. If the members here could introduce themselves, starting with Representative Ledbetter.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is State Representative Robert Ledbetter, representing the 109th District, 300 miles away from here, encompassing all of Columbia County.
Josh Kale, Beaver, Washington counties.
Andrew Kozma of the southern part of Allegheny County and the northern part of Washington County.
Good afternoon, Jim Rigby, Cambria, and Somerset counties.
Thank you, gentlemen. And there will be other members coming and going as we go. It's kind of how it works with these hearings. For those that come online, you know the drill. Mute it when you get online. This is being live streamed, so everything here will be live streamed. And we do try and make sure that our testifiers, if possible, keep it between 3 and 5 minutes so that we can enjoy some Q&A back and forth. I've never actually gavelled anybody out. This is our 78th hearing. So I don't anticipate ever having to do that, but just if you could keep it within there. Today's hearing is on the crisis of costs, and it's a hot topic right now, mainly because of it's being election season, and there is a lot of blame going around on why costs are going up, and there's this concept of what's called greedflation. But then there's this concept of the government living too well. I think it was Ronald Reagan who said that inflation occurs when the government is basically spending too much. And it certainly rings true. We went through the COVID pandemic, and our federal government spent trillions of dollars beyond what it usually spends. And then we went even further with the quote-unquote Inflation Reduction Act. Which is remarkable, and now all of a sudden we seem surprised when costs are going up across the board, and the impacts, the subtle impacts it's having. I'm looking forward to hearing about how that impacts each and every one of you today. But I just have to note, before we introduce the testifiers, apparently before COVID, companies weren't greedy. They weren't raising costs. It just happened after all that federal money jumped in, and all of a sudden we had a problem with greedflation. It's a new phenomena that the profit motive was not being pushed at that point. Of course, I'm being facetious when I say that. I just want to point out that profit has always been a motive for a company, and it should be a motive. And there's nothing wrong with making a profit, and the market corrects over pricing and all of those things. So anyway, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Representative Kuzma. This is your district, Representative Kuzma. I want to give you a brief opportunity to give a introduction, and we will go from there.
Sure, I can. To those of you in the room and those that are viewing this live across the Commonwealth, I can't thank you enough for being here. The purpose of the Policy Committee is to give us a better understanding and hear from the people that are dealing with issues facing our Commonwealth every day, okay? Mr. Pasco and I go way back. He worked with my father in high school, okay? That's how long Mr. Pasco and I have known each other and how closely associated he and I are. Mr. Pasco knows more about EMS services, medical services, emergency services, you name it, than anybody in this room. And it's helpful to have someone give us some input on inflation, costs of medicine, costs of supplies that you're going through nonstop. Really helpful. Norm Candelor, entrepreneur, director for Sarah's Candy, has more energy than anybody I've ever met in my entire life. Deals with commodities like chocolate, deals with retail, deals with services, both professional and direct-to-consumer services. Very thankful to have you here. Patrick Haver, one of the nicest people that I've ever met. If you go to his house, because I knocked on 11,000 doors to get this gig, if you go to his house, there are signs that say, NRA member, no trespassing. Trespassers will be shot and survivors will be shot again, okay? I'm going up to this house. And Dave Montgomery in the back was with me. I said, Dave, I can't go meet this guy. You got to do it. He said, you got to do it. So I go up there. He said, "Oh, that's great. You know, I never had someone come up and invited me in." And ever since that, I know. And ever since then, he and I have been really tight. But he's a phenomenal member of the community, phenomenal volunteer for his parish, does some really good things in the community. And then Kurt Couchman, Americans for Prosperity is great. The work that you do on a regular basis, advocating for certain types of policy is phenomenal, and we greatly appreciate your input. So with that, I will turn that back over to the chairman.
Thank you, Representative Kuzma. Thank you for having us here in your beautiful district. And I will introduce the four testifiers, as you just introduced. Doug Pascal is the chief of the Southeast Regional EMS. Norm, this is the second time that you've had the opportunity to testify in front of our committee, and I thoroughly enjoyed the first time, so I'm looking forward to this. Mr. Haver, thank you for being here. Mr. Couchman, thank you for being here. Mr. Pascal, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me. My name is Douglas Pasco. I am the chief of Southeast Regional EMS. I've been involved in EMS in the Commonwealth for over 30 years, and I'm certified as a pre-hospital registered nurse as well as a paramedic. The merger that we had to create Southeast Regional EMS was a direct result of inadequate funding and support of your EMS services Commonwealth-wide. We were originally the Jefferson Hills area EMS that served for over 40 years independently, and the Elizabeth Township EMS, which served over 20 years independently. Since then, we've also assumed the responsibility for the city of Clairton when their EMS system failed due to lack of funding. EMS has long been viewed as self-sustaining because we have the ability to third-party bill. Unfortunately, the reimbursement rates do not equate or cover the cost of providing the service. The lessons that we've learned from 9/11, the Boston bombings, school shootings, and the COVID-19 pandemic have taught us that EMS now has to staff for a level of readiness, not a bare minimum staffing model, which is what most of us have to do due to funding inadequacies. The business model for EMS is bleak. There's rising costs of personnel, fuel, insurances, and equipment that are met head-on with a fixed fee schedule reimbursement. EMS agencies are cash poor, and loans are an essential financial tool for our survival in acquiring new equipment. Rapidly rising interest rates over the past 4 years have resulted in a rapid and dramatic effect on purchasing power and the ability for services to acquire loans. The PA Department of Health sets equipment standards for us, and they are usually unfunded mandates. For one example is a heart monitor. The new heart monitor technology came out several years ago, requiring us to have heart monitors that can do a 12-lead EKG and transmit to a doctor that can diagnose the heart attack and assist us with treatments. That drove the cost of a monitor from $15,000 to nearly $40,000, and we received zero subsidization from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The issue that we're faced here now, being cash poor, is to acquire loans that make sense. There is a 2% loan program through the state. We can receive a 2% loan for 10 years for the purchase of an ambulance when the ambulance's useful life is only 4 to 5 years. So what we end up is upside down in a loan, and when we're ready to turn it back in, we owe double, if not triple, what the ambulance is worth at that cost. When equipment needs to be replaced at rapidly increasing prices, EMS must consider staffing cuts to balance the budget. The cuts to EMS staffing occur while demands for services are at an all-time high. We are an essential public service that requires a combination of federal assistance with Medicare reimbursement rates, state assistance, and subsidization of grants and local tax support in order to continue. You can view us on life support right now. We can no longer self-sustain with the rising costs overshadowing the fixed reimbursement. Medicare and Medicaid only pay a portion of the cost of our services, and the annual cost of living does not meet the demand. Many agencies will be forced to many services will be forced to reduce or cut services to remain budget neutral. I'll leave you with this. In 1985, there was about 145 ambulance services in the state, in Allegheny County. We're under 40 right now. Each and every one going out had something to do with the cost of living and funding inadequacies. Thank you.
Mr. Candelor.
They said to watch that green button, so I was concerned there. First of all, thanks for having me back again. I really did enjoy it last time. Andrew's been not only a great representative for our state, but also a great friend of mine. I appreciate that. Just a remarkable young guy, and I always have to put a plug in for him because I mean that sincerely. I'm going to talk about inflation on a different level. First of all, I want to address Mr. Kyle's remarks at the beginning about businesses and profit. Yes, we're in business, and we're in business to make a profit. Nobody goes into business not to make a profit. If they are, it's probably an illegal business. It's that simple, okay? Nobody goes out there to go into business not to make a profit. So let's get that set right now. When you talk about how it works and why inflation works and why our prices go up, it's very simple. Cocoa beans, 18 months ago, $2,000 a ton. Today, $8,800 a ton. That's fact. Look it up. Google it yourself, okay? We watch it every day. We don't wake up in the morning and say, I think today we're going to go charge our customers more money. That's not the way it works. That's not what we do. That's not our intention. Okay? It's more important for us to get candy, our candy, in people's homes than it is to price it out to the point where they can't get in their homes. The more candy in people's homes, the better off we all are. Sarah's Candies, by far, is a phenomenal company to work for. I've been fortunate since 1982. I've been at every level of the company. We have a leader by the name of Bill Saris that absolutely knows what the heck he's doing. We now purchased a big 140,000 square foot building, and we continue to grow. And again, going back to Mr. Kyle's comments about COVID and stuff, through COVID, through fires, through everything, every challenge and every adversity that could possibly be put in front of us, the Saris family has plowed right through it. Not only did we plow right through it, we grew right through it. We're the 6th largest producer in the country today of chocolate-covered solid items. This is happening right here in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania, right in the state of Pennsylvania. I'm not saying we're Hershey's. I'm not saying we're Mars or these big outfits, but we're the 6th largest producer in the country, right here being manufactured in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania, of chocolate-covered solid items, which is this pretzel. Okay? That's what makes it up, 90% of the sales. So when we talk about inflation, I'm going to identify it as a cancer because inflation takes the life out of people. Inflation stops all the fun that people have. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter you can pay your bills. What you have left over is what you can spend. What you have left over, that disposable income, is what you use to go out to enjoy yourself with, to whatever it may be. It might be a pirate game, it might be a football game, it might be going out to dinner. When you start shrinking that bottom number to the point where there's nothing left, people don't have fun no more. It becomes stressful. It causes health issues. People start to do things maybe wrong. Okay? It causes so many problems. Is there an answer for it? I don't know that. I'm not here. I don't know that. I'm not the expert on that. All I'm telling you is when people justify what's going on, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to go out and raise prices today because I feel like I can get more out of this person. We want more volume in people's homes. We want people to be able to buy more. You go to a grocery store right now, and I'm not going to mention any names. We all know it. You buy 4 items, you spend $100. People can't afford that. I don't care who you are. It's irrelevant. That bottom number is the most important number. The gross is great. The essentials you have to have. You have to have your rent. You have to have your house. You have to have your utilities. What's left over is what people have to spend. And it's getting shrunk and shrunk and shrunk to the point where people can't do anything anymore. And we're taking the fun out of living. It's like a cancer. Inflation is something that's being put upon us that's just causing us to react in different ways. And it's just not fun anymore. I enjoy these meetings. I enjoy the opportunity to be able to hear and speak because I love business. Yes, I'm an entrepreneur. Being in business is not easy. You have to have a really thick skin, and I deal with a lot to be in business. And we chose that life, and that's what we do. But being here in front of you, there's got to be a way that we got to put more money back on our people's pockets again. I don't have those answers. That's why we elected you folks to figure it out. I think taxation is really a problem. I think that we got to find a way to give people more money in their pockets. When they spend it, everybody wins. I don't have all the answers to it. I'm definitely not a tax lawyer, so I can't tell you how it all works. But I know keep on charging more and more percentages and more taxes is not going to help out that bottom line. And we've got to find a way to put more money into the people's pockets so they can spend it into the economy to stimulate the economy and they can do some things they want to do that are fun again, because people are really getting tired of not being able to do what they want to do and have a good time. And other than that, I really thank you for being here, and appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Candelora, I just want to mention that the last time you were here, we actually got to tour the factory, and it was fantastic. That was one of our first policy hearings, and Saras's, I've been going to Saras's since I was a little boy. It is.
I know my time's up and stuff like that, but I'm going to tell you something. If you folks would spend time with those,
A green light.
oh, I'm sorry.
Right there.
I'm sorry. If you, Sarah's Cans is a phenomenal company to work for,
It
and I
is.
I cannot even begin to tell you the level of appreciation I have for the company. My assistant over here, Kim, will also vouch for what I'm saying here 100%. Mr. Saras, Bill Saras, has a vision that is absolutely so unique and so different than everybody else's. I could walk into a room with the greatest idea on the planet, thinking I got this thing licked, I'm going to be a superstar. When he gets done with me, when he sees 2 years down the road, I wasn't even thinking about. He just has a great vision for business. Andrew's had an opportunity to sit down and talk with him a couple times, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And he's just a very, very intelligent person. We're very lucky to have Sarah's Candies in, first of all, Washington County, but also in the state of Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And what we're doing is just really amazing. We're hiring people every day. Through all the stuff that's happened, every single day we have opportunities for folks to come to work. And I'm not talking $5 an hour jobs. I'm talking careers. It's just an amazing opportunity. So
Good,
thank you.
good Greek family too, right?
Good Greek family, absolutely. Thank you.
I'm partial to Greek families, being Greek myself. Mr. Haver.
Hello, my name is Patrick Haver. I'm 73 years young and have been a longtime resident of Pleasant Hills in the 39th District, represented by Andrew Kuzma. I'm retired after working for General Electric GE Supply for 25 years. I retired almost 10 years ago, January 1st, 2015. I also worked as the executive director of our weekend soup kitchen, First Charities, First Food and Friends, located in the east end of Pittsburgh. I ran the soup kitchen for 22 years and retired on September 1st, 2021. I still have my hand in cooking by running my church's Lenten fish fry for the past 2 years. The soup kitchen fish fry opened my eyes to food costs and how the rising prices of food overall makes it difficult for anyone to stay on budget. I have lived in 2 millennia, 2 centuries, and 8 decades. I have seen the best of times and the worst of times. These days are challenging times because of inflation. Being a senior citizen on a fixed income, inflation has played havoc with all areas of my life. I want to focus on how inflation has affected me more and more over the past few years. Food costs, home utilities, property and school taxes, car and homeowners insurance, medicine, medical procedures, pet food, pet insurance, veterinary costs, church, nonprofits, and all others with their hands out, all taking a bite of my limited income. I'm fortunate that I have a pension and am able to receive Social Security, so many others my age have to survive on much less. Food is the first place I feel how inflation hurts me daily. Price increases in eggs, milk, bread, salad, fruits, vegetables. The items I buy sparingly anymore are meats and seafood, like you said, because they are so high priced. I used to eat 3 meals a day. Now it's 2 meals a day, and more often just one main meal and a snack. With all the other costs to live these days, I have cut back mostly on my food purchases. I rarely go out to eat anymore, which was something I really enjoyed regularly. Breakfasts run $15 or more, lunch $20 or more, dinner is $40 or more just for one person. It's just too much. All the cost increases businesses incur are passed on to the consumer, so we have to cut back going out to dine. No longer can seniors rob Peter to pay Paul. The money's just not there. Utilities are another huge inflation area for the homeowner. Here are my utilities and increases in 2024. Duquesne Light, in addition to planned rate increases, have gone up 6%. Pennsylvania American Water has increased over 10%. People's Gas has increased 13.8%. My borough and school taxes have increased 4%. My car insurance and homeowners insurance went up 24% and 30%. My dog's veterinary monthly insurance rose over the past 3 years from $45 a month to over $90 a month. The majority of my mail that comes in is mostly from nonprofits asking for a handout. Today, I got 8 pieces of mail. 2 were asking me to come to some event as a fundraiser, but 4 of them were outright, we want money. And so with that, my church also is asking for people to increase their giving to 15%. I believe in supporting our political candidates and running for office. That is a wise investment of my discretionary funds. I'm better off than most people my age. But I too have worries about being able to afford everything year after year unless inflation is reined in. The economy is the #1 issue for me this election season. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you.
Mr. Cochran.
Chairman Kale, Representative Kuzma, and members of the House Republican Policy Committee, thank you for the opportunity to share views on the causes and consequences of inflation and America's affordability crisis. I look forward to discussing federal and state strategies to unleash prosperity and to refocus governments on their proper roles. Reckless spending in Washington, D.C. caused the inflation surge. Inflation reached 41-year highs in 2022, and prices today are 20% higher than in January 2021. The average Pennsylvania household spends $984 more per month for the same goods and services. And their cumulative cost of inflation so far is about $24,445. Inflation faded when one-party progressive control in D.C. ended because the federal borrowing binge slowed. Unfortunately, prices are permanently higher now. Let's consider how federal politicians caused inflation. The 2008 financial crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic gave cover for Democratic members of Congress, led by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, to push expansive debt-financed legislation to advance an ambitious progressive agenda. Nearly all Democrats went along with it, as have some Republicans at times. During COVID, the Federal Reserve bought most of the new debt, more than doubled its assets, and monetized the debt. The gap between the money supply growth and real economic growth drives inflation. Regulatory burdens amplified fiscal and monetary mistakes. Pandemic lockdowns and an aggressive Biden-Harris administration undermined economic growth and kept new supplies of goods and services from absorbing excessive money. Disgracefully, some of the profligate politicians responsible for inflation want to mislead Americans into believing that corporate profits, price gouging, and greedflation are to blame. Pennsylvania's own Senator Bob Casey is the high priest of deceit in this regard, and it hurts innocent providers of goods and services. Corporate profits properly measured have been about 10% of the economy. The federal flood of cash pushed them up a little during the pandemic, but they certainly did not cause inflation. I and a colleague explained Senator Casey's errors and the actual causes of inflation in a paper this summer. Even so, prices for many of life's necessities were too high before this administration and before the pandemic. Governments at all levels have enacted policies to subsidize demand and to restrict supply, which push up prices without necessarily increasing the supply of housing, healthcare, education, transportation, and more. These goods and services are often too expensive and don't often match our individual needs as well as they could. State legislators can do little to address inflation directly, but they can reduce subsidies and unnecessary red tape to bring down prices across the board. To do so, legislators must scrutinize all government activities regularly. Legislative budgets should include and be able to manage all spending and revenue, including tax expenditures. Yet the Pennsylvania General Assembly and Congress consider separate appropriations bills that collectively cover a minority of spending and no revenue. In Congress, new bipartisan legislation would build a complete budget around the appropriations bills and engage all committees. Pennsylvania's General Assembly could do likewise. More legislators could participate in the process to drive better results across all activities. For instance, scaling back low-value activities to focus on doing core functions better could also make room for tax upgrades that improve Pennsylvania's competitiveness and grow prosperity. More and better jobs can help Pennsylvanians overcome the burden of inflation. Better budgeting can fix problems, boost compensation and working conditions, and unleash more flourishing. Growing the economy by removing unneeded barriers can soak up some excess money and reduce inflation, although any single state's impact would be small. Pennsylvania should also adopt rules to balance the budget over the medium term instead of every year. Surpluses in good years would become reserves to fill gaps in bad years. Policies would be more stable and predictable, which would unleash more private sector investment and opportunity. Legislators could focus more on permanent improvements instead of cobbling together temporary patches for revenue swings. Fiscally strong and independent states would deter congressional bailouts, which often carry federalism-eroding strings that last much longer than the money does. Several other states already do something similar. Budgeting is central, and that's what I work on, but it isn't everything. Legislators should also divide up the regular review of laws in their committee's jurisdictions so they can seek out and reduce unmerited barriers and otherwise make sure that they make sense for modern times. Thank you for the opportunity to share these thoughts. I look forward to your questions and to working with you toward a brighter future for all Pennsylvanians and for all Americans.
Thank you. Representative Kuzma.
Okay, now we get to grill you all. Okay, so the first question I have is for Mr. Pasco. So you talked about the rising costs and the effect that it's had on emergency medical services across our state. At one time, we had 145,000 ambulance services, and now we're down to 40,000. So it seems to me like, from the experience I've had listening to you and what I've worked on whenever I was a township commissioner, EMS services have accounted for or reacted to the rising costs in three ways. You've consolidated services, so there are less, and you try to consolidate, become bigger, and maybe minimize administrative costs. I know that emergency medical service providers have gone to local municipalities and have requested assistance in the form of tax funds, whether it be a direct EMS tax or just a monetary contribution. And then I do know that I have met with a number of emergency medical service providers about state grants. So we have grants, which are taxes, we have municipal allocations, which are taxes, and we have EMS services consolidating. What else is there left to do? From that period of time, the costs have gone up and you've done all those things. But after that, what's the next solution, or is that it?
The next solution, or how we've combated to this point in time, is to reduce the amount of staffing we have. You know, we've basically pushed our crews harder, taking more calls with less time between, sometimes at the demise of our own mental health. But that's basically it. Unless Medicare would decide to start reimbursing us for the cost of our goods, and obviously that was in the 90s when they did a 4-year split from the old system, which was basically they paid what we billed, and I'm not suggesting that, to a completely new model that they just set a rate without actual, in my opinion, good factual information on the cost of doing business. And in turn, all other insurance companies followed that model, which crippled the EMS system.
Representative Rigby.
Thank you, panel. This too is for the chief. In January, the governor was in Johnstown, Pennsylvania at the West End Ambulance Service, where he committed $30 million more for EMS, specifically for EMS, doubling it up to $60 million from its current 30. In February, he then changes and says that the money is for both EMS and fire, and we know that the monies that are being run through the fire company and emergency medical services grants. And we know the percentages are certainly off kilter for what your percentages are versus the fire service. So what was originally committed to EMS specifically was that $300 million shot in the arm. And it was be in perpetuity. It was going to come every year. This wasn't a one-time deal. So I don't know why you backtracked on that and a month later then says, no, it's not going to be just EMS now. It's going to be EMS and fire. Because we know, and both services are in dire need of the money, and we know that. They did increase the loaded rate for transport, where originally it had to be 20 miles, and now it's from point of load to where they're going. So I serve on emergency services, veterans and emergency services. We work a lot with the fire and EMS. So just picking at your brain, where do we go? And I think you answered that with Representative Kuzma. And we see it in my town. We don't have the night crew anymore. Hospitals are now buying their own ambulances because they can't get an ambulance to come to transport somebody home after a certain hour, that they've now got to transport them themselves. And they're not there to take the business away from our EMS. That's the last thing that our hospital wants to do. But they're now in a position where they have no other alternatives because we just don't have the manpower. And whether it was volunteer or paid, and when I got into it in 77, 78, you were fire and EMS. We ran ambulance and fire out of one station, and most of that has moved now to where, the EMS services are paid services. And so what should we be looking for? What are we missing? And I'm sure there's not a golden ticket that's going to get you to where you need to be, but just if I could pick your brain, what might we be missing that we should be looking at?
Right. Excellent question. Well, I think part of the reason we got to where we are is volunteerism as a whole has dramatically tanked because of inflation and people now needing to work 1 to 2 jobs to make ends meet, right? So instead of hanging out at the local fire EMS house in the evening, we're working a second job. And many of our EMTs and paramedics also work a second part-time job just to fill the gap. I think to start, I would tell you that the communities, the local communities, need to do their part. That's where it starts. They find a way to fund police. They find a way to buy fire trucks. But when it comes to EMS, they try to find a way to replace us with a different EMS agency that's willing to come in and do it for free. You can't set standards on one end saying, I want an ambulance within 8 or 9 minutes when I call 911, but I'm not going to pay anything for it. It doesn't work that way. That's a broke system. Even from a grant perspective, I met with Representative Kuzma on some issues and some needs that we have. And what we quickly discovered is, as a nonprofit EMS agency, we are not eligible to apply for most of the grants. So our only option is to go to one of our communities, have them file on our behalf, and forego a grant that they may be looking for Parks and Recreation or something else.
And just to add to your point of volunteerism, and the volunteers, I'm looking back in the 70s, we peaked over 300,000. And I believe we're down less than 36,000 now across the Commonwealth. Huge, huge decline. And you're right, because we are working 2 or 3 jobs. I think some of it is training. Look, our folks are coming out much better prepared than we did in the 70s and 80s. They know a lot more, but we've lost a lot. And in reference to your equipment, a new ambulance between 80 to 150,000, depending on how you equip it.
It's a lot more than that.
And it's even more than that now.
We just purchased 2 unequipped, $245,000 each. Unequipped. There's probably $600,000 total with equipment, if not more. And just to speak, there was one other, you talked about the dramatic downsize of volunteerism, and then you made another point. I'm trying to regroup. I wanted to...
I said a lot of it is training too.
Yes,
when I was in 78, 79, we had the Somerset County Fire School, the Cambria County Fire School, or if you were fortunate enough, you went to Weirton for rescue school.
Right.
But they came around once a year. These guys are training now year round.
Yeah, and to that point, Representative, when I became an EMT and paramedic, I spent 5 months to be certified as an EMT and 9 months for a paramedic. Today, for a paramedic, it's over 2 years, and it's almost a degree program. Here's the problem. We cannot compete with nursing. So if I'm going to go 4 years, am I going to become a nurse in an ER making $40, $50 an hour, or a paramedic at 25?
And we see that a lot. We see a lot of our AMS that end up being nurse or nurse practitioners. They have that in-field training, which is great for them if they're going to be the practitioner. So, yeah, unfortunately, we lose them, and it's a tough business. And I don't know what the answer is as far as recruitment. I've always said it takes a special type of person that wants to be fire and EMS to do that type of work. Everybody thinks we just go out and we're just going to go out and recruit a bunch of new people. And it doesn't work that way. But I thank you for your service, gentlemen on the panels. I thank you for your testimonies. Thank you, Chairman.
Representative Rigby, if I may ask you a question, that volunteer number, was that EMS or was that EMS firefighters?
EMS fire, that's a combination. EMS fire that was back in the 70s was over 300,000, and we're down less than 36,000 today.
Yeah.
2,500 fire stations, somewhere in that neighborhood, maybe a little less across the Commonwealth. And over 90% of those are volunteer. If we lose those, the financial impact that's going to have on the Commonwealth, to where you would have to go all paid. I think we were looking somewhere in the neighborhood of an annual $10 billion plus budget. Where's that money come from?
Yeah. Thank you, Representative Ledbetter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for your testimonies this afternoon. As the chairman mentioned, he has not gavelled anyone down before, but I have pushed my luck, so I will be as expeditious as possible. Gentlemen, we've talked a lot about the pressures, the economic pressures, the inflationary pressures, not only on our communities, but across the Commonwealth. I mentioned earlier the distance that I've traveled, and yet the same issues that are being discussed this afternoon from all of you, I'm hearing from my municipal officials, from my business owners, and from the men and women who make up the community that I represent. And when we consider the regulatory environment within Pennsylvania, we see an issue. Because as a private sector guy, I came from the business world prior to entering into public service, and you know where all your dollars go. And in the local levels of government, you also know where all your dollars go. Yet George Mason University in 2020, they did an analysis, and the Commonwealth has over 160 regulations on the books, 160,000 rather, regulations on the books. And of the 44 states that they were analyzing, we ranked 11th out of that. So we are far and away leading in this terrible category of over-regulating the communities and the neighborhoods that make up this great Commonwealth. Chief Pasco, you mentioned in your testimony no unfunded mandates. That's something that our friends at PSATS beat into our head because they're left holding the bag. There was a township supervisor that told me before I took office, now remember, Robert, we deal in dollars and cents, and if you don't have the dollars, it doesn't make sense. And that might be cliche, but it's true. Mr. Candelor, you said that we are taking the fun out of living. This is something that is obvious to so many, and you asked us, while rhetorical, something that we must apply ourselves to. We've got to find a way to put more money in people's pockets. And finally, Mr. Haver, in your testimony, you spoke about how you are literally cutting back on food to address the rising cost of living, going from 3 meals to 2 meals to 1 large meal and a snack. You are literally, Mr. Haver, tightening your belt. So with that context, my question is going to be directed to you, Mr. Couchman. The work that Americans for Prosperity does from a think tank perspective and the model policies that you advocate for, certainly something that I value, and I know my colleagues here on this panel value as well. So looking at the situation where we're at, we've heard the testimony. Governor Shapiro introduced a budget that exceeded anticipated tax revenues by over $3 billion, ignoring calls like mine to adhere to policy like Taxpayer Protection Act, TPA, which I hope, pending a favorable outcome going into the next legislative cycle, we can run that point of policy. Ignoring simple, straightforward, common sense positions like the REINS Act, House Bill 487, which I'm a co-sponsor of, which would direct any regulation that would require a $1 million cost or more over a 5-year period to receive legislative approval. These things are important because it prevents the rampant spending and lack of oversight that is currently plaguing Harrisburg. So my question to you, Mr. Couchman, is, are there other policy pillars that Americans for Prosperity have identified that we are missing other than the REINS Act and TPA? And as a follow-up, if not, how imperative is it to run and pass spending limit measures like TPA and the REINS Act?
Thank you for those comments. There are many, many things that you can do. In fact, our Pennsylvania State Director, Emily Green, submitted a letter to the Speaker at the beginning of last year talking about how it's important for all committees to be going through the laws that they oversee to make sure that they make sense. Now, different committees have different sizes of jurisdiction, so you have to divide and conquer in order to make that work tractable. And fortunately, in Pennsylvania, you have fairly robust staff resources to help you do that work. So that would be an important thing to go through and see if there are added costs being applied to local governments and to the private sector, and see where you can scale those back to get better use or get more use out of any given dollar that's out there. Now, with respect to spending limits, I certainly agree. I talked about the idea of structural balance, where you balance the budget over the medium term. That is a little bit different from the Taxpayer Bill of Rights related measure that the Taxpayer Protection Act is involved with. The issue is that TPA and the Colorado Tabor model limit spending growth to inflation and population. That does not include the productivity increases that we see year on and year out. It's about 1%, maybe a little bit more, depending on the year. And over time, that would mean that you would be reducing your spending as a share of the economy. That might be a fine outcome for some number of years, but it's our view that that's not necessarily the ideal fiscal rule, because you do want to have at least the possibility of long-term stability in terms of your state spending. And that's why we support something more like structural balance. We've developed some model policy. I'd be happy to discuss more of that with you if you'd like.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate that, Mr. Couchman. Panelists, thank you, gentlemen.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Apologize for missing some of the testimony, but it's great to be back here in Representative Kuzma's district, and I was able to hear some of the enthusiastic Mr. Candelors from a previous, which was outstanding. I went home and were telling my kids, one in particular, he really likes to cook, and I was like, you know, there's this chocolate company, and they train, and they do, and they pay. Yes, yes. So I think we may have a future together, particularly if we expand dark chocolate, which is my personal favorite. The first part of my question is directed to that manufacturing environment. You know, some of what we've talked about throughout the state, this incentive for people to stay on the couch. You know, we're trying to meet with Secretary Arkush to talk about our able-bodied adults, even without dependents. You know, Pennsylvania is the 5th largest welfare state in the nation by expense. 1.4 million able-bodied adults, 200,000 don't even have kids. So when you're covering multiple shift operations, how helpful would it be to get 20 hours a week of a person that you could train? You know, and the second side of that, can you touch on the difference between, let's say, a private industry council government-run training program and an internal employer-run? Because there seems to be a disconnect there at times. There's things available, but they may not be the things that you're looking for.
Well, first of all, thank you, and I appreciate it. I am enthusiastic, and that's just my way of doing things, and I have a lot of passion. I think, and I'm speaking on behalf of Sarah's Candies here and other businesses I have, I think what we're talking about here is we got to get people off their couches. And I heard this gentleman say that, and it really resonates with me because that's the problem. We have a lot of job openings. People are not lining up for jobs, and they should be, especially in a chocolate factory. I mean, it's a fun job. It's a sweet job. Nobody can ever be mad at you for being in the candy business. Nobody's ever mad at me, ever. I'm in the candy business. How can you be mad at me, right? But and there's great career opportunities for these young folks.
Married, sir?
Huh?
Are you married?
Yes. yes. Yeah, I go through that all the time.
That's a hearing for a different day, Mr.
Uh,
Chairman.
but I think what you're saying here, and I'm going to say it to you my simplest way, we got to bring excitement back to our people. Our people, are, the country, and in Pennsylvania, maybe you're right. We're not excited. We'll sit on our couches instead of go out the door and doing something. Nothing good can happen to you unless you walk out the door and go do something. And I think we're so stuck at home, we're so stuck on our couches, we're so stuck in a rut that we're not seeing the possibilities out there. And I also want to emphasize the difference between a job and a career. At Sarah's Candies, we're very fortunate because we give you opportunities for careers. It's not punching and punching out. It's not punching at 8 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning and starting at your clock. Oh, it's 2 o'clock. I got 3 more hours to go. Oh, it's 1 o'clock. No, that's not what we do. We work around the clock. We take it home with us. It's a career, like you guys are doing. This doesn't end here. I mean, you leave here today, you got all kinds of things you got to do to make this thing work. When we leave Saras's or any local business, we have to make it work. We don't have time. We don't have the resources to have it done for us. We have to make it work ourselves. And I just think that, you talk about young people or even anybody, there's so many opportunities out there to go do things. And we raise the minimum wage up to the point where it's ridiculous sometimes, and I get that. I mean, fair wages are fair for everybody, but it's not making anybody go out to work. They're not running out the door lining up. There's no lines down at our place waiting to get a job today, and there should be.
Can you, let's dig just a little bit deeper in the, even though, personally we've been resistant, government shouldn't be mandating a starting wage because that's a training wage, but one of the things that hasn't changed is the government earning ceiling. So when somebody is receiving benefits, if they earn over, they hit that cliff. What is an approximate starting wage for an untrained person that would be beginning a process?
Oh, at our place?
Sure.
$16, $17 an hour.
Yeah, so if they're working at 16, 17, even before their 90 days, what happens to them, and it's a government black ceiling cutoff that they very quickly, in just a matter of weeks, exceed their government allowed earnings and they start losing so much more. How can we change the welfare cliff to a welfare plateau from your perspective?
Well, first of all, we need the government to do that. I mean, I don't know the exact way how you do that, but that's if you're limiting somebody that they're making earnings, or there's an easier way for them to make money sitting at home instead of going to work, then we got to figure out a way to fix that. And I'm not one of you guys, so I don't have the privilege of putting my 2 cents in on that, or how even to do that. I will tell you this. Again, I'm speaking on behalf of Sarah's Candies here today, and what I do. I watch people. $18 an hour. Target, Walmart, stock boys, stock girls. What's the incentive to go get an education if you can make $17, $18 an hour putting boxes on a shelf? And there's no level of excelling to a higher level by going to school or getting education in today's economy. And how do we get the government to participate with us and understand that when it's all settled and done, we got to find a way to get more visitors in the stores. And when you take this inflation, you shrink that disposable income to a point where there's nothing left, people don't leave their houses. Nothing happens until somebody walks through the door. That's when you have an opportunity to sell something or for them to buy something. Them staying at home, them sitting on their couches, or them thinking they have the feeling they can't go out today, and this gentleman hit the nail right in the head. He cut his meals down from 3 to 2 or 2 to 1. When they feel that they can't go out today and do something because they got to watch every penny in their pocket because they might need something tomorrow that they don't have today, it's a scary place to be. And I don't have your answers. I don't have the information you guys have and all the reports you have. I just know that the government, and I'm saying government, you folks, can make life a lot easier for not just the businesses but also people by finding a way to put more money in their pockets. Because if people go out and they visit and they spend, everybody wins. When this gentleman or this gentleman goes out, or myself go out and we spend dollars in our economy, it goes to many tax brackets. It goes to sales tax. It goes to maybe local tax. The business itself is now paying more taxes. Everybody wins. Nobody wins if people are staying home because they can't spend $1 today. Nobody, including the government, including you guys. Nobody. We got to get people an opportunity to go out and spend their dollars. These numbers here don't work. I mean, you have a high gross. Let's just say a high gross of $100, and at the end you have $1 left. That's not going to work. Find a way to feed more money so that bottom number's $30 left, and they'll spend it. Nobody saves money. Nobody. And you know this. Come on, we don't do it. I don't do it. I get my paycheck, I can't wait to go spend it. You do. I can tell you right now, you guys got hobbies. You can't wait to go spend your income somewhere because you have. Come on, let's be honest.
Well, it's a good transition as because the House Republicans and the Republican-controlled Senate for years, we did stack aside and create, return, and restore a savings account and a rainy day fund, and then this current governor is now aggressively overspending. Mr. Couchman, Pennsylvania is a big ship. It's not going to turn overnight. But you mentioned multi-year budgeting, which has been a very effective tool in other states. If Pennsylvania was doing a 2-year budget, so there would be an initial forecast, earnings, revenues, and then a second-year adjustment, how do you see that first, just even that first baby step at longer-term planning and adjusting, how could that benefit us as a state? Because it's not a big thing, but in our world, it's an enormous change from this annual 6 or 7 month battle that happens.
Well, thank you, Representative Nelson. It's good to see you again. There's that saying, think globally, act locally. And when it comes to budgeting, I tend to think long-term and act right now, annually. Because, if you have an annual cycle, then you can get more done faster than if you only have a chance to do something every other year. So I wouldn't recommend moving to biennial budgeting, but I would say that with an annual process, there's a lot of things you could do to make it a better, more inclusive, more bottom-up, healthier, more productive situation. I talked about a couple of those in the testimony. The idea behind structural balance, about balancing over the medium term, that's because revenue fluctuates pretty wildly from year to year. If you look at, I think it's figure 3 in the testimony, that's Pennsylvania data. The one that's going up and down like crazy, that is revenue, general fund revenue from year to year for Pennsylvania. And the steady line, that is what a modeled version of a structural balance rule would give you. And the big benefit of that is that it frees you from having to think about all the different proposals that the governor's office is sending your way, so you can have more time to think about, to work with your colleagues on the things that you care about, the upgrades that you want to see possible for Pennsylvanians. So you're less of a reactive mode, more of a proactive mode. Another thing I didn't mention in this testimony, but I did yesterday when testifying before the Kansas legislature virtually, I'm not that much of a traveler, is the idea of taking shutdowns off the table. There are some states that have done what are called automatic continuing resolutions for generations. Wisconsin is one of those. Rhode Island is another. So you've got a purple state and a blue state. And then North Carolina just adopted that in 2016. And it has kept the conflict between a progressive Democratic governor and what is now a supermajority Republican legislature from spilling out into the state as a whole. It confines the political conflict over the budgeting to the political actors. And one of the benefits of that is that in order to get the new budget, they do everything in one bill, which is what I recommended here. To get the new budget done, you actually have to include people and at least give their ideas a fair chance to be heard, so it does become a lot more inclusive, a lot more bottom-up, and it seems to work very well for them. You see some of the trend lines. We've talked about spending controls, and North Carolina, even without an official spending cap, they have been very lean with their budgeting over the last decade or so, because they knew they needed to in order to get the tax reform that they are now driving at on both the corporate and the individual side that is drawing a lot of business activity to North Carolina. It's not just the taxes and the budgeting, it's also they're taking a comprehensive look to overhauling their regulatory apparatus. And again, all regulations derive from statutes originally, laws that are passed maybe long ago by the Pennsylvania General Assembly and need to be updated. So if you can get a handle on all these different pieces, and you can do that through better budgeting, then there's a lot you can do to unleash the joy in life that we want to see. The regulatory burden is like a soul-crushing thing for the people that have to live with it. So let's take off the soul-crushing and let the souls sort of fly free more, right?
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and we're going to hand it back over to Representative Kuzma for a couple of finishing questions. Mr. Candelora, you mentioned a statistic that caught my attention, that cocoa beans, cocoa beans went from, you say 1,800 to 8,800? $2,000 to 8,800. A ton. Yeah, green light, yeah.
I'll get there. Okay, so it went from, the exact number is $2,200 to $8,000.
What
today.
drove up that cost? Do you have any
Probably
idea?
the uncertainty in Ukraine and the wars and the things of that nature. Remember, cocoa beans come from Indonesia. So things are happening out in other countries and other places that we don't have any control over. Maybe we do. I don't understand how that works. But the bottom line is, we get hit with stuff that we have no control over.
Without giving me trade secrets, and if you can't answer this question, don't. I don't want to get you in trouble. I would guess, I don't know if it's true or not, but I would want to ask the question. I would assume your take home's probably less with that inflated price, because you still got to get the product in market, and there's only a certain level that will be acceptable to the market at a certain price. And if it's with that much higher of a base cost, I mean,
Well,
the margins probably.
This is the part that people don't realize. If you take that number, and I'll use again 2,200 to 8,000, and you look at and I'll use our price of our 8-ounce pretzels, they were $12.95 before this increase, and now they're $14.95. $2 is a very small amount on what the rate of is. So we've been able to keep it as good as possible, but you have to find a way to get more efficient. You have to find a way to cut areas maybe that we didn't have to cut before. Maybe the boxes have to be different. Maybe the inside sleeve has to be different. You have to find a way for people to be able to afford it. No matter how good something is, if you can't afford it, you can't buy it.
That's right. And it's just, I find it very ironic and troubling that you're probably making less profit, and then on the other end getting accused of creating the problem through quote-unquote greedflation.
Your opening comment about businesses raising prices and things of that nature, that's why I started off with that reasoning. We do everything in our power. Our job at Sarah's Candies, we produce chocolates, we produce candies. It doesn't do us any good to have our candies in our warehouses. First of all, it's a perishable good. So we only have so much time we can sell it in before it's got to be destroyed or it goes bad. So when we make this product, and we do a lot. We do 30-some thousand pounds of chocolate a day. Okay, take that times $8,000 a ton, and you can do the math yourself. It's very, very expensive that in one day just to make the chocolate that we need for our items. Them items sitting in the warehouse and not in the stores being sold doesn't do us any good. So we got to keep that price to a point where people can put it in their stores. And it's not just the retailer or the person, the consumer buying this product. We have vendors that have to buy this and put it on their shelves, and their costs go up also. Remember, if we're charging $14.95 a box of pretzels, that means that Shop and Save or that Giant Eagle is paying more for that product also. So it's an overall effect that it just cripples us. Yeah. It just cripples us, and our hands are tied because it's given to us as it wants to be delivered to us. We have no say in it at all. Our invoices come in, we buy in futures. You all know what commodities are. We buy our cocoa beans and our things in futures like everybody else does. We try to buy in advance to keep our pricing where it has to be. But, if a war breaks out in Ukraine and they shut things down, like right now there's a situation going on with these supplies for these trucks and stuff, this is a major crisis. I hope people realize it might not just be in Pennsylvania. It's nationwide. I mean, we just went through COVID. We just went through a major supply shortage. Probably in my lifetime, I'm 67 years old. In my lifetime, I haven't even heard of a supply shortage. And now we had this COVID thing we just got over, or just getting over, and now we're going into where we're going to maybe have a trucker strike or a situation where we can't get supplies again. So what do you think is going to happen to these prices? In all honesty, if we were sitting here 2 months from now and everything was settled, what do you think is going to happen to the cost of this? It's going to go up.
Yep.
It's going to go up.
Yep, and I love what you said regarding tax cuts for a number of reasons. Number one, it's the individual investing, not the government. And number two, it doesn't create inflation because you're not pumping more money into the system. You're letting people keep more of their own money. I just got done reading a biography on Calvin Coolidge. A lot of people think that Reagan or maybe Kennedy was the first one to really come up with this, what they called scientific taxation, what Reagan called trickle-down economics. But it was really Andrew Mellon during the Coolidge, and maybe McKinley before that. But Andrew Mellon really was the champion of it. And it's amazing. It went right to your point where they studied it in a very scientific manner where they would cut taxes a certain way. And over the course of a year, that same year, they would see revenues increasing. And it's because people are investing it, people are spending it. And so it was actually a net positive for everybody, where you had people had more money and the federal government had more money. And that's how they cut down the national debt, which was dramatic after World War I through this taxation policy. So I appreciate what you were saying.
You nailed it just now.
Yeah.
In all honesty, your key word, the very first thing you said was where people can keep more money. People don't keep money.
They spend it.
They spend it.
Yep.
If you give people more money, they're going to spend it. They're going to put it into the economy, and when it goes into the economy, everybody wins.
Yep.
More people get hired. Prices, tax, and unfortunately, taxes get paid more because there's more taxation on the items or at every level. So yes, the word there is they don't keep it. Give it to them because nobody keeps it. We're not controllable enough to keep it.
And
We
even if
spend
it goes into a bank, it's still being used, right?
and used, it's being used.
So, Mr. Haver, I got a question. Oh, go ahead. I'm
no,
sorry.
I'm good. Thank you.
You had mentioned you're retired.
Yes.
Does your retirement income keep up with inflation?
It's funny, yesterday, and my wife just about cried. I sat down and we looked at not only the big expenses that we talked about here, but just the little things that you do on a day-to-day basis. You run out somewhere and you just pick up a coffee. You run somewhere, you pick up something to eat for lunch, just on the go. You stop somewhere because it's one of the grandkids' birthdays. You got to get a birthday present. We began to really write down all the little expenses, and we were shocked that we're able to keep the house and the car and live. It was just absolutely frustrating and amazing because years ago, and again, being retired 10 years from GE and keeping it working for the soup kitchen, I didn't make very much of that. Wasn't the idea. It was an income to just supplement a little bit. But when all that went away and we're just living on pension and Social Security, we were really shocked last night at, wow, we have 6 grandkids. So we have 6 birthdays there. We have 3 kids. We have their birthdays, Christmas time. We began to look at all these little things that you don't think of on a day-to-day basis. And my wife almost cried when she saw this. And I'm like, you know what? Fortunately, we're better off than most people my age. That's the sad news.
Yeah, and you touched on something else that many of us, if not all of us, in fact, I'd be willing to bet all of us do have to deal with is property taxes. And the fact that people on fixed incomes deal with increasing costs of property taxes and how other states have dealt with it. And I don't want to jump into that here at this hearing, but that is also tied into the issues that you're talking about.
I was talking with someone recently that bought a house 5 years ago. And in that plan of homes, the houses have gone up $100,000 in that time. So their property tax have gone up as the value of the homes have gone up there. And because of that, the husband they're giving up their second car because he can't afford it. So yeah, just something as simple as a property tax or your homeowner's insurance. These little things that bite at our daily living expenses and what we have available really do matter in the long run. And that's why we can always look at the big picture and say, well, yes, I make this much money. And I think I'm going to come back to work and work for you, you know?
We'll take you.
Yeah, thank you. And, but yeah, I really feel for those who are on such a limited income and that are not keeping up with inflation. It is just biting at, as you said, being able to go out and do a lot of things. We stay home a whole lot more than we ever did before.
Can I add to this? Mm-hmm. Okay, he mentioned 2 big key points there. First of all, this is really simple words, sacrifices. Inflation is causing sacrifices that we don't need. Secondly, he said something here, again, kind of like your kept word. He said something about running out of the house. This is what I'm talking about. If you don't have money in your pocket, you cannot run out of the house. You have nowhere to go besides your four walls. That's all you have. We want people running out of the house. We want that cup of coffee being bought. We want those gifts for the 6 grandkids being bought. You can't do that on your couch. We got to have money in our pockets to run out of the house. And when folks like this gentleman are saying, I'm making a sacrifice, my wife's crying because we might not have the income we need to take care of these 6 grandkids, there's something wrong. And I hate to say this to you guys, you got to fix it. I mean, you got to fix it. I hate to put this on you guys. We're surviving under what you're giving us to work with. You got to fix it, man. I mean, I don't know how you do it. I know you have a Democratic side, a Republican side. I know you have to get together somehow. You got to fix it because nobody wins if we sit in our houses. Nobody. And this guy, he hit it nail on the head. Running out of the house should be the topic of this conversation today. Get people off their butts to be able to go out and do something with that extra dollar. I don't care if it's a cup of coffee. It makes a difference. And that's, just so you know, I appreciate that. It's just great.
Thank you. Representative Kuzma.
Sure, I just have one last question for Patrick. So it seems, and I'm going to ask you this question, and you need to talk on behalf of all the retired people in the state, okay?
Okay.
All right.
I know them all.
Okay. So because of rising costs, what I've heard you testify to is that you are cutting the meals that you're buying going out. You are buying generic food. You're consuming less food. The gifts, whether they be birthday or Christmas gifts for your grandkids, are in jeopardy, okay? The first question is, what else is there left to cut? I mean, seniors are already bearing the brunt of this, okay, because you're on fixed income. What do you cut? Do you get rid of your dogs? Do you get rid of your cable? What else do you have left then? That's the first question. The second is, it seems to me like the people that caused this mess, and I'm really not a partisan person, okay, but there are people that caused this mess. The people that caused it are now saying, okay, we're going to fix it. We're going to do a middle-class tax cut. And that sounds wonderful. But they forget that people don't just spend money and their income on taxes, right? You know what a tax is? Spending twice on buying a house. Spending $300 going into the grocery store to buy groceries. Paying double for gasoline, okay? A tax cut to me, for personal income taxes, whenever I'm someone that's retired on a fixed income, means nothing compared to being able to spend $2 for a gallon of gas and 2% for interest rates for buying a house. So first is, what else is there left to cut? Second is, does the tax credit mean anything to you if you're on a fixed income? And third is, which would you rather have, the tax credit, or would you actually like to have the cause addressed and inflation brought down?
Well, I drive a 10-year-old car, and when my air conditioner went out this summer, I had to decide to spend $2,500 to get it fixed, or I had to figure out, am I going to buy a $25,000, $30,000 car and then have payments? I'm 73 years old. I don't know if I want to be paying for that car when I'm 90. So I got it fixed. And because of that, fortunately, like you said about having a nest egg, my wife and I have a nest egg, so we were okay. But at that same time, when we did that, there was a trip we planned on taking that we canceled. So there are things that when unexpected expenses come up in particular, that we have to really rebudget, and everything gets cut. We don't turn on as I talk with my wife. Do we need to leave that light on? Do we need to do this? So it's a day-to-day little thing that you look at where you're saving a nickel here, a dime there, but it all adds up to the senior on a fixed income. Your second question?
Second question is, would a personal income tax credit mean much to you compared to twice the cost for gasoline?
I'm not sure exactly how the credit would help me overall for a long term. What I need to see are prices that become available reasonable so that I can get off the couch. My wife and I can go to the movies and buy some popcorn. I literally, most of the time, do not travel more than 5 to 7 miles from my house, 10 miles over to my daughter's house once a week, and then I head down to Washington, PA once a month to visit a friend, and that's it. So I've really restricted how much I travel compared to days when I would travel to near York, Pennsylvania, and my wife and I like Lancaster, and all those strips have gone out the window. We just can't afford it.
Sacrifices.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for being here, for testifying. Before I close it out, I'm going to hand it back over to Representative Kuzma just to say thank you and to close this out. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I can't thank you all enough for being here. Like I said, I think that this was really enlightening. I think that this was really good. I had an idea from your biographies and speaking to the four of you before this hearing of what we were going to hear, but it was really enlightening for me. And I know that we are going to work very hard, and our committee is going to work very hard in addressing all these issues and trying to get us back on track. Thank you.
We appreciate you guys also.
Thank you.
Don't think we don't. We appreciate you guys also tremendously. We got to get something done because as a business owner, we got to get something done. I'm going to say one other thing to you here. I thought we were done. I'm sorry. You know, and let's talk about our local real fast here while I have a chance. U.S. Steel, Corning, Anchor, Hawking Glass, Denora and the sewing factories, they're gone. Shouldn't be happening. When are we going to get these businesses, these big major companies back into our local Mon Valley areas again, doing what they've been doing all around? And seriously, when I say this to you, at one time, I'm 67 years old. I lived through this, guys. Denora was the sewing capital of the world. Jordache jeans, Calvin Klein jeans, everything was made in Denora, Pennsylvania. There's not a piece of thread in Denora today. Okay? There's not a steel mill with smoke coming out of the chimney as you drive down the highways anymore in the Mon Valley today. Last week they closed up, I think it's Anchor Hawking Glass or maybe Corning Glass, I forget. In Charleroi, it's been there 128 years or something like that. We got to stop the bleeding, guys.
Anchor Hawking.
Oh, thank you. We got to stop the bleeding. You know, you can't fix something until we stop the bleeding. Maybe get the Band-Aids out and start using stitches. But we got to find a way to stop the bleeding because we're losing more and more productive things that we need. And you talk about cost increase, and we can't be buying overseas all the time. We got to find a way. And I don't have those answers. I'm just throwing that out there to you.
What I have found, Mr. Candelora, and I'm going to close up here with this, and you asked us to find a way to do something to fix this. I'll push back a little bit on it. I think the reason why we're in these predicaments is because of government experiments, is because we thought that we knew better than markets. We thought that we could dictate demand, and we knew the supply better. We see it in the energy space all the time, and that has driven companies out of developing in Pennsylvania, in this region. Capital chases demand unless there's a disruption, and the disruption of Harrisburg has been significant because this Commonwealth has every resource to be great, and it should be great.
Can we fix it?
We are going to fix it. But fixing it is going to require us to get out of the way. That's going to be the solution, is to get Harrisburg out of the way so that people like you can invest and can grow a region. Carnegie didn't build his mills on a tax credit. He built them because the natural resources were here, the access to market was here, the access to capital was here, and the resilient workforce was here. We still have all of those things, except today we have Harrisburg that gets in the way, and that's also the issue with inflation. It's government overspending. It's government thinking it knows best. And the consequence is the consumer pays the price. So I truly appreciate you all being here. And the next policy committee hearing takes place tomorrow, October 4th in Erie County. We'll be continuing this important discussion on inflation. So thank you all so much for being here. Have a great day.